First, we need to define free trade. Last week, we talked about some kind of instrument that can be used for the policy. So we talk about tariff and subsidies and so on. But when we talk about free trade this week, we think about the trade without substantial level of tariffs and subsidies. So I like to define free trade, say there is no tariff and there is no subsidies provided. So then, why do we need, to argue for no tariff, no subsidies? I can summarize as four. In this case, the first one is that free trade can utilize efficient allocation of resources. So if we are able to allocate our resources efficiently, then we can increase nation's welfare. This is what they argue for the free trade. So let's try to recall what we already know. So now think about the market. In a market, we know that there is a demand and supply, and this is the quantity and this is the price. And price is determined at this level, price. Then we know that this is consumer surplus, CS. And this part is producer surplus. So without trade, we can get this much of a social welfare. Okay? But if we have trade, as you recall, in this case, this is the price in the domestic market. Let me say PD, price of domestic in the domestic market. But if price in the world market is lower, then this country can import this product from the foreign market. Then what we can see is that consumers can buy the same product at a lower price. Not this price, now this price. So consumer surplus increase. Surplus. But as more import is made, domestic producers produce less. So surplus decrease to this level. But as a whole, we can find that nation's welfare increase up to this level. So by comparing this case and this case, we can find out that nation's welfare increase up to this. This is nothing but gains from trade. Okay, gains from trade. But now think about the case that tariff is imposed when we have a trade. So let me draw the same graph. Demand and supply. This is the price in the domestic market. But if trade is allowed, then the price will go down to this level. But now consider that government imposed tariff. Then price in the domestic market will increase as much as the tariff if the economy is very small. Okay. So now think about this case. If the economy is very small, price will increase from this to this level, right? And therefore, the consumers will buy less. Therefore, the amount of import will shrink from this to this level. Okay. So government will collect this much of tax revenue. Then what we can find is that as the price increase, consumers pay higher price. Therefore, their consumer surplus decrease from this level to this level. So they are going to lose this much of a consumer surplus. So consumer surplus will decline. How much? This much, right here. This much. But then, what about producer surplus? Producer surplus will increase from this smaller triangle to this bigger triangle as domestic producers receive the higher price. So producer surplus increase. How much? This much from this. Then out of this, lost in consumer surplus, government take this much. Therefore, what we know is that these two smaller triangles are simply lost because of tariff. So this part is lost. By comparing this, national welfare declines because of the tariff. So that's the first argument. Okay, for free trade. So we should not impose tariff because national welfare decreases with tariff. So that's why these people prefer to have free trade, no tariffs. Second argument for free trade is the firms may enjoy economies of scale. We talk about this economy scale in the previous chapters. Right? So what is the economy scale? The economy scale is the phenomenon that average cost of making product decreases as the scale of production increases. So now think about this case. If there is no trade, then domestic market is only this big. The firm can produce up to this point. The price average cost will be this much. But if the trade is allowed, then this firm can produce more to export the world market and domestic market. So average cost will decline. Okay, will decline. So this is as average cost decline, the price of domestic product will also decline. So this is the benefit to the economy. So we talk about two types of economies of scale. One is external economy scale, mostly resulted from the clustering of smaller firms in one space. But we also talk about internal economy scale. This internal economy scale usually takes place when the market is monopolistic competition. Okay, so in the case, what we learned is that I just wanted to remind you what we studied. Then the profit, this is number of firms. This is the number of firms that we studied. This is the profit and average cost. The profit declines as the number of firms increases. But average cost increases as number of firms increases. So without trade, average cost and price profit is determined this level, and number of firms determined this level. But what we learned is that the trade is allowed. Then what happens is that this average cost curve increases. As this cost increases, what we know is that average cost decline, and then number of firms increases. This is what we learned. So the firms can enjoy economies of scale. This is the second argument. Third argument, okay, for the free trade is that, okay, because of competition with the foreign companies, as I said here in this case, number of firms in the market increases with trade. So because of this increasing number of firms, competition increases. As competition increases, well, it encourages the firms to have innovation. But at the same time, the competition will discourage, okay, this rent-seeking behavior. Okay. Increase innovation but decrease rent-seeking behavior. Then what is the rent-seeking behavior? This rent-seeking behavior actually coming from monopoly. Okay, it's monopoly. So as you easily think that under the monopoly, the only form, the monopolist charge higher price. Okay. Therefore, they can increase their profit. Monopoly profit increase. So this is what we can easily think about monopoly. Right? But then, what happens is that the monopolist profit depending on the status of monopoly. Therefore, what happens is that the main concern of the monopolist is to maintain monopoly status. If they lose monopoly status, then their profit decreases. So therefore, the biggest concern of monopolists is to maintain this monopoly status. So in order to maintain monopoly status, they usually spend a lot of money from their profit to lobby the government to maintain this, okay, monopoly status. This behavior is called rent-seeking behavior. This behavior is called rent-seeking behavior. And fourth reason for the free trade is that the free trade is the best feasible policy. Think about the case that government try to impose tariff or provide subsidies or try to allocate quotas. Then what happened? A lot of special interest groups spend a lot of money to get more subsidies, to get more quotas. So, there will be some social cost of negotiating, okay, all these interests. The cost is high. So rather than having this high social cost, well, we just don't think about this, then there could be the feasible policy when you think about the social cost.